The Chimera Ants were close to ending the world, but did you know they originated from the Dark Continent? The Dark Continent is a mysterious landmass lying beyond the shores of Lake Mobius, and there the Chimera Ants are far from the biggest threat of that region. In today's video, I'll be exploring every known threat from the Dark Continent and giving you all the information we have on them to prepare for the upcoming manga arcs. According to the official Dangerous Creatures Evaluation list used by the Hunter Association itself, the Chimera Ant crisis was rated a B. But we already have documented evidence of 5 threats from the Dark Continent which are all rated higher. Some of them are even rated A, even beyond B+, which means that not even the strongest hunters are capable of handling those threats. Just think about that for a second. The entire Hunter Association mobilized, the old chairman sacrificed himself, and every person who witnessed Meruem thought nothing could be worse than that. They were wrong. Before we get into the 5 threats themselves, we need to establish what kind of place produces threats like these. The known world, including every country or territory we've seen in the entire series, exists inside Lake Mobius. The Dark Continent is the landmass that surrounds it, and is incomparably larger. Humanity has known about it for centuries, but they chose to pretend it does not exist, because the alternative is too terrifying to acknowledge. The 5 most powerful nations on Earth, the V5, signed a formal treaty prohibiting any attempt to reach the Dark Continent. And this wasn't due to a lack of ambition. In fact, the V5 nations have all sent expeditions to the Dark Continent, but every time humanity tried, the survivors came back fewer and more broken than anyone expected. Of all the expeditions ever attempted, 5 were considered successful because some people made it back alive. In total, across all 5 voyages combined, there were 28 survivors, with the survival rate across all known attempts sitting at roughly 0.04%. Before we enter the Dark Continent, we need to talk about the guide system. In order to reach the Dark Continent, a human expedition needs to contact the Gatekeeper, a race of magical beasts that serves as the only known link between the known world and the continent beyond. The Gatekeepers will assign a guide to the expedition, which simplifies the exploration process. Without a guide, most expeditions would be doomed the second they cross Lake Mobius' oceanic borders. But the Gatekeepers impose a condition upon the explorers when they leave. Any survivors who return are compelled to bring a calamity from the Dark Continent back with them. This condition is described as a lesson to humanity for daring to venture beyond their boundaries. We don't exactly know what the Gatekeepers or guides are, and the community's best guess is that they're a separate race of mythical species that originated from the Dark Continent. But one thing is clear, their goal is to protect humanity from the outside world, not the other way around. So why do I think the Gatekeepers are a threat? Think about it this way, they have the power to keep the rest of the Dark Continent from encroaching on Lake Mobius, which means they must be way more powerful than regular humans. So if the Hunters ever decide to oppose the will of the Gatekeepers, things could get really ugly fast. Okay, so now let's get into the Dark Continent. We only have confirmation of 5 threats from the outside world because only 5 expeditions live to tell the tale. And it's entirely possible that these are the weakest beings from the Dark Continent because they failed to finish the job. Let's start off with Pap, the human-keeping beast. Many years ago, the Big Arosei Union sent 1,000 people into the Dark Continent to retrieve the Unmanned Rock, an ore capable of generating massive electricity when submerged in water. This was clean, limitless energy produced at a rate of 20,000 kilowatts per day from a rock the size of a pebble. However, the expedition failed after they fell prey to Pap, a creature that traps and domesticates human beings. Its victims are found as shrunken, doll-like bodies with feeler-like extensions inserted directly into the skull. Pap keeps its victims alive and maintains them in a chemically altered state of consciousness, feeding on them while simultaneously preventing them from dying. Being captured by Pap is described as a trade-off between life and pleasure, as it offers its victims a sense of comfort while stripping away everything that makes a person a person. Pap lives in a mountain range along the northeast shore of Lake Mobius, and is rated with a threat level of A. Our next threat is Brion, a botanical weapon. The United States of Saherta sent elite forces north of Lake Mobius in search of an herb said to cure all known diseases. Only 2 people came back, and they failed to keep the herb alive until they got to Lake Mobius. The entity they encountered was Brion, which has one of the most unsettling appearances in the Hunter x Hunter universe. The creature has a human-like body, but where a head should be, there's an enormous sphere. Brion's actual combat abilities are almost entirely unknown, and all we know is the result. Elite forces were wiped out. An entire expedition of trained specialists hit Brion's territory and were destroyed so completely that only 2 people survived the encounter. Brion exists to guard the ruins and the herb inside them, and we don't know if that purpose was programmed into it by a vanished civilization, or whether it's acting on pure territorial instinct. Brion's threat level is rated at B+ overall, but its raw combat power is among the highest recorded. Following that, we have Hellbell, a twin-tailed snake. The Federation of Ochima wanted longevity, and they sent more than 1,000 people south of Lake Mobius in search of nitro rice, a food described as the ultimate secret to extending life. The expedition only found swampland, and 99% of the explorers fell prey to Hellbell in those swamps. This creature gets its name from the distinctive black bell-shaped growth protruding from just above its face, and uses its venom to create a homicidal desire in its targets, making them turn on each other. Our next threat befell the expedition sent by the Mimbo Republic in search of the Trinity Elixir, described as the mother solution for all liquids. Only 3 people came back, and none of them had their sanity. The being they encountered was I, a gaseous life form with limb-like appendages extending from its main body. Some fans believe that Nanika, the wish-granting entity possessing Aluka Zoldyck, is also a type of I from the Dark Continent, but we have no official manga confirmation for this claim. However, Nanika's victims die by being crushed or wrung, matching Ai's described kill method, and her appearance when manifesting includes the same deep black eyes recorded for Ai. Ai is described as a threat level A since even the survivors turned clinically insane, and it's potentially brought a part of itself into the known world. Our next threat was found when the Kukanyu Kingdom went to the Dark Continent to retrieve Metallion, an alchemical plant. Beyond Netero was their guide, and they actually found Metallion, but then several members contracted a sickness they had not prepared for. 6 people came back, including Beyond, and 1 was a hunter who had been infected. The sickness is called Zobae disease, and it's the cruelest trick the Dark Continent has ever played. Zobae kills almost everyone who contracts it, but for those who survive the initial infection, it does something else. The body becomes self-sustaining in the most horrifying way possible. It regenerates tissue by forcing the victim to consume their own flesh. You eat yourself, you grow back, and you eat yourself again in an endless cycle. The sole confirmed survivor of Zobae in the known world cannot speak coherently. He just looks at people with bloodshot eyes and a completely blank expression. Zobae has a threat level of B+ overall, but unlike Hellbell or Pap, Zobae is not a creature you fight. And finally, we have the measuring stick to compare all their Dark Continent threats, the Chimera Ants. Their arc is the longest and most dangerous storyline in Hunter x Hunter, as Meruem was born with a body that outclassed the strongest human alive. His royal guards were capable of killing virtually every Nen user who encountered them, and the entire resolution of the arc depended on Isaac Netero's sacrifice and the poor man's rose. The Chimera Ants are a species that originally came from the Dark Continent, and we all know how they got here is that the Queen somehow drifted into the known world badly injured and alone. She landed on a self-governed territory known as NGL, and quickly began producing more ants, which eventually began consuming the defenseless humans of NGL. Most known Chimera Ant queens are tiny compared to the ones we see in the series, but this queen was different. She was a mutated specimen, standing roughly 2 meters tall, and she possessed the ability that makes the entire species so dangerous: phagogenesis. When the queen eats another creature, her offspring inherit parts of that creature's body. Once she started eating humans, her children inherited human intelligence, human individuality, and eventually the ability to use Nen. Normal humans spend years learning how to open their aura nodes, control their Ten, sharpen their Ren, and develop a Hatsu, but the Chimera Ants skip most of that process through raw biology. Meruem was the final product of everything the queen had consumed, and tore himself out of the queen before his birth was complete, fatally injuring her in the process. However, on the dangerous creatures evaluation list, the Chimera Ant crisis is rated B, which means all 5 of the threats are more dangerous than the Chimera Ants. Think about it this way: Meruem could not have resisted Hellbell's venom, Neferpito could not have cured a Zobae infection, and perhaps not even the poor man's rose would have been enough to take out Ai. The Dark Continent is so much more dangerous than the Chimera Ants arc because the rules are completely different, and no one knows what those rules are. And that wraps up all the Dark Continent threats we know of. Do you think there are threats out there that even surpass the A+ level? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below.